Can you tell somebody's experienced trauma based on their handwriting? Today, we're going to dive into that question and more.
Welcome to the Stop Suffering in Silence podcast with your host, Denise Walsh and Rachel Timothy.
Hey guys, welcome back to Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh, and I am here with co-host Rachel Timothy. And this past week, we got a chance to speak. We're invited to speak at a local church in Wheaton, Illinois area. Our first time in Chicagoland, speaking and sharing. Rachel, you shared about your story and truly opened blind eyes about what trafficking can look like here in the United States. And so let's share a little bit about that experience, but we're going to mostly spend our time tonight diving into the questions and conversations we had with people afterwards, including someone who is learning all about handwriting analysis, which was really fascinating.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you to Amy and Rob Renault for having us and letting us speak at their church. We had a fantastic turnout. Like 125. It was wonderful.
It was beautiful. And that's really, guys, how this works. Like, they are a nonprofit called Visionary Family Ministries, and they invited us to come. And if you're interested in having Rachel share at your small group, your church, your school, get in touch with us. That's how it works, is you guys plan it and we come and pour into your people. So it was a great event. I mean, it's always a hard conversation. This is not fun to talk about, but Rachel, you do an amazing job of sharing your story in a linear fashion where people can imagine themselves in your shoes, showing some pictures and journal entries. We can kind of see life through a fourth grade eyes and understand how the grooming and gaslighting and abuse kind of piles on top of each other. And it doesn't just start with the abuse. And so I feel like you do a great job of explaining how all of that works and showing people how they can spot the red flags themselves.
Oh, thanks. Like, it's always hard to share my story. That piece is difficult, but afterwards, the conversations are priceless. One of them immediately after that I remember specifically was the pastor of the church. And so he was not the one that invited us, but he was the one that Rob and Amy kind of convinced that, yes, you need to have this trafficking event at your church. And he admitted to me, he was like, I don't know that this is something we should talk about in the church. But after the fact, he thanked me over and over again. He said, this absolutely needs talked about because we need to be able to see the red flags. And he said, I had no idea it was in my backyard. And two of his teenage daughters were there. And he said, I am pretty certain we're going to be going home and we have a lot to process. And that thrills me because now their eyes are opened to just another level that perpetrators could potentially try to get to their daughters, and they're going to be able to stop it before it ever happens.
Right. One of the things you mention and you talk about is that it's kind of like a testing period. So the predator or perpetrator will test and see how open you are. Like, well, do you want to come to my room at school and hang out? Or do you want to hang out after school and do this project? Or do you want to come to my house? And it kind of escalates, but it starts with that testing phase. And so if the girls and the parents are a bit more aware, then the goal would be, right, is that you protect them during that time.
Yeah, exactly. Because the grooming phase and the testing phase is so confusing and can happen so quickly without even realizing it. So then another one of the conversations I had with somebody was just that they didn't really know what grooming was. And now, instead of blaming themselves for the abuse they endured, they can see that it was a mastermind manipulator using grooming to steal their heart. And boy, that's healing. That is so powerful for a survivor to understand.
And I would like to push back on this mastermind. Predators, in my opinion, are not smart.
Go ahead.
Let's not call them like this master of anything except they're wired differently and do not live like in the world of human compassion.
And maybe that's why it feels like a mastermind, just because it's so different than what a normal human being would think.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine. This is my just unprofessional opinion. I can't imagine that they're like, I think they just be a different type of person. You know, I don't think that they're like, you know, like liars. Like, what lie did I tell? And they just are liars. I just don't think that they're consciously finagling all of these things. I think they're just not, they're wired differently, in my opinion. So, anyway, I don't want to give
Yeah.
them credit.
I agree. No, you can totally push me back on that. I
Well, I
will
agree.
gladly.
It's so helpful for survivors to hear these words that they might not have heard before, because it puts, like, Brene Brown wrote a book, Atlas of the Heart. And I remember a couple years ago, you read through it and you thought, oh my gosh, this is why it's so helpful to have words to put on my situation. Because
Yes.
otherwise we can be in our own head and it can sound, we don't quite know what's going on. But when you have a word to put to it, it makes it more linear and it can make things less confusing.
You can get it out. Otherwise, it just stays and festers. Like if you don't have a word to explain it, then you don't have a way to get it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So what other questions and conversations did you have after the event?
I had one interesting conversation with a man. He was coming up to get our book. I don't know if you were around at the table at this time, but he was like, how many books can I have? Because I didn't know this happened in our backyard and I want like 10, 12. I don't remember how many books he ended up buying, just so people are made aware. And you could just see this righteous anger fuming in his eyes.
Yeah, I feel like he was the pastor of either that church or a different church, and he was gonna put him in the lobby.
Yeah, I think, well, he wasn't the pastor of that church, but he might have been like maybe an associate or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did. He went and put them in the lobby so that people could pick them up and read them.
Wow.
So I was excited to hear that.
All right. What else?
So it was funny. One of the women, we had the opportunity to have like what we love to call ours army, you know, just a whole group of our team with us there that were loving on people and helping with the table. And of course, ours army goes much farther than that, but it was great to have those group of women there. And one of them had the opportunity. Then the next night, she was supposed to speak to, I believe it was survivors at a retreat in her area. And she was talking to me about how she was like, I want to share your story because I know that these women have been through similar things. And I was able to give her a past video that I had done so that she could show that video. But it just reminded me of, you know, how we have talked about raising money for the opportunity to have like a 15-20 minute version of my story where you can take it to these places and share it so that more people will have their eyes opened. And she said she shared the video I gave her, and there were a lot of good questions, a lot of good follow-up. The grooming piece stood out the most to them as well. So it just was another reiteration of, okay, we need to keep moving forward with this video because it could be powerful.
Absolutely. It just gives the opportunity to share your story with you not necessarily needing to be present, which expands the reach for sure. So if you guys are interested in donating to specifically that video, go to our website, stopsuffering.org. There's a donate button and you can say it's for the video and it will go directly towards funding that project.
Yeah, that would be awesome. There's another girl and her mom that came forward, and this girl, oh goodness, she looked like she could have been 12 years old, but I think that means because I'm getting older. But really, she was 18 and getting ready to go into college. And with just passion in her eyes, she looked at me and said, this is what I want to do when I grow up. I want to counsel women who have been trafficked. And I just thought it was really important for her to hear, like, we need you, because it's really, really hard to find a counselor these days.
Right. And you even had somebody come up and ask, how do I find a counselor that's trauma informed? And that, well, I would have to hope that most counselors are trauma informed. That doesn't mean they're trafficking informed.
Correct. That's just a whole like deeper level of trauma. And people, I've ran into it. I mean, I've had counselors quit on me because it was just too intense, too dark. I've had times when I've gone to counselors, like called their offices, and I'll tell them why I need counseling, and they'll say, we are not equipped to handle that form of trauma or that depth of trauma. And in
That's
many
really
ways, I'm
frightening.
like, are you serious? But then in other ways, I'm like, well, I'm glad they're honest, because I would hate to get started and spend money and spend time and then them tell me, okay, this is too much. But it's not easy to find somebody who understands the dynamics of trafficking and the things that does to a person's brain, and how to be able to get out of it.
So how did you respond when you got asked that question?
Honestly, I hadn't been asked that question before, so it took me a second, but I realized that some of my counselors that were truly the best were associated with safe houses. And so I told her, I said, maybe contact some local safe houses, because typically the counselors that work with their survivors isn't only working with their survivors. It's like a outpatient. It's a, not, I don't know, can't think of the word, but
Yeah,
like,
well, they're out there. They maybe have their own private practice, and then they
yes,
contract out with this, with the.
that's it.
With that.
Contract out. It's exactly what I was going for. So contact and see if there's somebody there that could help you. Because my guess is they're for sure going to know what they're doing and be able to help you.
Another interesting conversation after the event was somebody who came up and started talking to you about your journal entries.
Okay, yeah. So this totally caught me off guard. So she came up to me, and she's in college, and she said, I just want to thank you for showing your journal entries. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. You're welcome. And she was like, no, I'm literally studying in psychology classes right now about handwriting and what it can tell about a person and where they're at in their trauma and what they're experiencing. And she said, you can tell by which direction the slant is on whether, they're depressed or they're anxious or scared or she said the main thing or one of the things that she noticed looking at my journal was when I would write the name of my coach in my journal, it was bigger than all of the other words. And she just said it shows that the control that he had over you and the way that your heart felt towards him in that time. But yeah, she said you would be really amazed at what you could learn about your handwriting. And I've noticed before, like you can tell when I'm in a really good place, like my handwriting is, really smooth and cursive and like just flows really pretty. And then when I'm literally in a flashback and trying to write down my flashback, it looks like chicken scratch and it's barely legible. But to know that every single day you could take something away based on your emotions, that it shows in your handwriting, it was kind of mind-boggling to me.
So if you go back to your old journals, what do you think your handwriting would show?
So one thing, so I kind of started to look into this, and one thing it talked about was if your handwriting changes as far as you go from cursive to print to capital letters to cursive to like if it's all over the place like that, usually means there's a lot of emotions not dealt with and trauma that is under the surface and just different pieces of your being kind of flowing in the process of your journaling. And I know I can think back when I was a kid and I wrote in all caps at points in my journals. Other times, I'd do cursive, but even to this day, I will transfer back and forth. And I didn't know there was a reason to it. I just thought, oh, look at that. Today I'm printing.
Well, it's interesting to think back of not just what you're doing now, but going back to the old journals and being able to pull your emotions just from the handwriting. It reminds me of someone who's kind of like in that squirrel, like, ooh, 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 like, not able to focus in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And the handwriting kind of mimics that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the things that I was sharing just in those two journal entries, it would jump from something super serious and deep to something very lighthearted to something serious and deep to lighthearted. And I don't know what that's about, but that's what it was.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense as a child that you can't stay in the deep hurt conversation, the confusion that you were living in, and that you would go bounce back to like, oh, it's a football game.
Yeah. I'm swimming later. Woohoo. And, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you learned when you're researching the handwriting?
I mean, the question is out there. Can you tell someone's trauma by their handwriting? And some people will say yes, that there are. And I think this woman that I was talking to, if you're really diving in and studying handwriting and the psychology behind it, and I think, yes, there is a way that you can tell trauma from handwriting. But there's others out there who are like, no, it just means you're lazy that day or you're whatever. But I think anybody knowing your own story, looking at different journal entries, if you were to open them up and go back and read what you had written or what that time in your life was like, I bet you anything your handwriting is going to look different that day than where you're at today. And it's just another opportunity to have open eyes to how your body is trying to get the trauma out.
Right. Right. The words are important, and then writing them and speaking them are an important part of the healing process, because we will try to stuff it and pretend like nothing's wrong, and that's where as we say, like, our house is on fire, but we keep saying everything's fine, I'm fine, and our handwriting's all over the place and different because it's trying to speak to us, trying to get it out. And journaling is a great, great way to get the words out, to just even acknowledge what's happening yourself first. And then eventually, the idea is that you can share it with a trusted counselor or a friend to start that healing process. But I can tell you, as a clinical psychologist, I have rarely had people say, yeah, I could figure this out all on my own and I didn't need anyone. And I just kept quiet about it. And because if they do choose that route, usually they're the 80-year-old sitting in our meetings with tears in their eyes going, oh my gosh, I thought it was me the whole time.
Exactly. So true. As we're talking about this, I think back to some of my journals in the past, and I remember if I went back like 15 years, the whole gist of majority of my journals had to do with wanting to start a family, like wanting to have kids, those types of things. And it was my dream, it was my goal, and it was like everything will be made better if I have, and I was hyper focused on it, which at that point I wasn't aware of all the trauma inside of me, but I had become hyper focused on this is what I want, and how do I make it happen. And then 5 years down the road, and now it's just like brain dumping of all of a sudden I have all these memories, and not wanting to be alive, not knowing how to process what's happening, the memories that are coming, my relationships now that I have these memories, who am I? It was a lot of just confusion and writing things that really didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then if you jump ahead another 5 years, at this point, I'm in the healing journey. And what I found that was the most, that stood out was me writing about my purpose. Like when I was having a bad day, I would write myself truths, and it was all based around, I have a purpose. God has a purpose for me. I have to keep going because of my purpose, and remembering my purpose. And that was enough to then be able to get me to where I'm at now, where I don't have to remind myself of that as much. I know I have a purpose. I know God has a purpose for me. But I can still see myself from time to time jumping back and forth to different thought processes that I had in the past.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think if you are out there, if you're a journaler, we'd love to hear some of your journaling experiences and how journaling has supported you. Journaling itself is a powerful coping skill, if not like life skill, right? Because it helps us to put our thoughts and feelings on paper so they no longer take up room in your head. It helps with stress reduction. It helps with like self-awareness, even trying to understand who am I and what do I want and what do I think and what's important to me. We could keep ruminating and having monkey mind in our head all the time, but when we put it on paper, it allows things to be much more clear. So I know I have a journal called the Dream Life Journal that I've created to help people who are new to journaling, who want some more journaling prompts, that want kind of the gratitude game at the beginning, and there's action at the end with a space for meditation and connection and writing in the middle. Because journaling is such a powerful piece of the process. It's a way to daily connect with yourself and like recenter yourself so then you can have a more fulfilling and maybe stable day is a good way to put it.
Yeah, no, so true. And then I've had a lot of people ask me like about writing books. How do I write my book? How do I write my story? And one of the things I'll tell them is journal every single day. And then when you go back and read it, you'll see many pieces that then you can use to help write your story and piece it all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you have any other good questions or good conversations after our event?
Man, we had a lot of good conversations and, several with survivors. And I don't necessarily want to go into the details of things like that. But one of the things that I found encouraging was hearing from a survivor where this was her church family that didn't know she was a survivor.
So
But she
this
said,
as in the church we were at.
the church we were at, yes.
Okay.
And the love and support that she felt when the very first time she walked in that door, and the immediate, we want to invite you to this, and we want to have you come to this. We would love if you came to this. Will you come up here and sit with me? Those pieces, like everybody's got a story. And when somebody's walking into an unknown church family and they accept you immediately without even knowing all the deep, dark things about your life, it makes it to where you feel safe sitting in those pews. And I don't know that the church even knows how good they did in that situation, but they rocked it. And because of that, she felt safe enough to then come to a trafficking conversation at the church that was going to be triggering for her. And so I just hope that's a bit of an encouragement to churches out there. Like anybody walking in, sometimes we think, oh, people probably don't want us talking to them, or they don't. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. They need to know that they matter. And even just offering a place for them to sit when they come in, it goes a really, really long way.
It absolutely does. I remember her. She came in, one of the first people to enter the doors, and came up to the table and immediately said, "How can I help?" And so we were chatting with her a bit, and she said, "I'm new to this church, and they've just been so welcoming that I knew I needed to come to this event." And then within, the 3 minutes of talking to her, we learned that she actually lives at a shelter. And she was telling us, and I live at the shelter. It's this women's shelter, a couple, towns away. And I was thinking, are you a staff there? Like what's going on? And so needless to say, one of our other friends got into a deeper conversation and learned, no, she's a survivor and living there. And the fact that the church welcomed her and created a space where she felt she belonged so quickly is really a true testament.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think we could all take note of that and do it every single Sunday.
Well, it just goes to show smiling makes a big deal. Welcoming people makes a big difference. And sometimes we can think, oh, they're probably with someone, or they already have people they are with, or they have family. But you don't know that. And so why not be welcoming to everyone?
Yep, exactly. And so a question that led from other people too was just the idea of grannies and making sure like our church has a granny program, maybe that to where, the older women of our congregation can then mentor and love on those that are younger that are going through some of these things. And being able to explain the power in a granny and survivor relationship and what that looks like. And so honestly, like when we go to these churches and we speak, all of these things, being trauma informed for when somebody new walks in, being able to set up a granny program, being able to have your eyes open to red flags, both for victims and for perpetrators, and then what to do when you spot it. All of that are things that we are able to cover and help churches or other organizations work through.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to add?
Well, tonight I get the opportunity to go speak at a safe house to survivors. And tomorrow I'm on a trafficking panel. I really don't know much about it, but they've asked me to be on it. So,
well, good. I'm sure you'll know the answers to their questions.
I hope so.
So yeah, you are really getting networked in your area, talking to police and schools and community members, which is really, again, it's just building that awareness. And I think more and more people are receptive and open and understanding. I think people are believing survivors more and more these days than they ever did.
I think so too. It's becoming more talked about, and that's what we need.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's two ways you can support us, you guys. You could donate down below. We've got our website. We are looking to raise money for a 15-20 minute video of Rachel's story that we can use for house events so that someone like you can grab that link and we'll teach you how to kind of have a house. I mean, I don't want to call it a party. What would we call it? We'll have to think of
event in a box.
Event in a box. There you go. A Stop SIS event, even in your own home, to easily bring awareness to your community as well. And so the donation box is below. We also are looking for grannies. So if you are interested if you are a healthy woman of faith and want to connect with a survivor, we've got a few that are going through our 90-day U-turn program right now, that at the end of the program, we'd love to connect them with a few grannies. And so we're doing, we have kind of an application process for that. So we'll put that link down below. And then if you're interested in having a share on your podcast or in your neck of the woods, then email us and you'll see all of the details in the description box below. But we are here ready to work with survivors and educate the community on how trafficking happens in our own backyard. So with that being said, have an awesome afternoon, you guys. We'll be back here, same time, same place next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your event, workshop, school, church, or organization, then please email racheltimothy.stopsis@gmail.com. If you are interested in donating to the Stop SIS ministry, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below. Or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence or you know somebody who is, then check out our website, stopsuffering.org, to learn more about our online programs and resources. We will always recommend that you also reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.